Good evening, dear listeners. As the sun sets and a tranquil hush envelopes the world around us, I invite you to settle in and take a deep breath. In this soothing space, we will embark on a gentle journey through time, exploring a topic that, while perhaps not famed for its excitement, holds a unique charm and tranquility. Tonight, we delve into the seemingly simple yet ever-important history of the Viking village's threshing floor maintenance timetables and grain residue disposal protocols. Imagine the soft rustling of grain, the gentle swaying of the fields under a soft breeze, and the rhythmic sounds of village life echoing through the air. Our story unfolds in the heart of Viking settlements, where community and cooperation were as integral to life as the very earth they tilled. As we explore the meticulous practices and protocols established by these resourceful people, allow the calming cadence of my words to carry you further into relaxation and comfort. We will begin by painting a serene picture of the Viking landscape, where the sun rises over vast fields of grain, shimmering in the golden light. This is where we will observe the early morning routines of the villagers as they prepared for the day's tasks. You will hear about the careful planning that went into creating maintenance timetables for the threshing floors, those essential spaces where the fruits of their labor were processed. We will take our time, delving into the rhythms of their work, the community gatherings, and the shared laughter that accompanied the labor. Next, we will gently transition into the specifics of grain residue disposal protocols. Here, we will discover how the Vikings approached this essential task with an air of resourcefulness and respect for their environment. From the safe disposal of leftover chaff to the clever ways they repurposed grain residue, we will uncover a world where nothing was wasted, and every part of the harvest was cherished. As we explore these practices, allow the soft imagery of the village, the sound of laughter, and the gentle rustling of grain to wash over you, lulling you into a state of calm. Throughout our journey, I encourage you to embrace the soothing cadence of our narrative. Let your mind wander as we touch upon the interconnectedness of the villagers, their traditions, and their unwavering dedication to their craft. This exploration is not merely a recounting of history, it is an invitation to find peace in the simplicity and rhythm of everyday life, echoing the values of community and sustainability that remain relevant even today. As we near the end of our exploration, the Viking villagers understood the delicate balance of nature, and through their methods, they impart lessons that continue to guide us. So, dear listeners, as we prepare to immerse ourselves in this gentle narrative, I invite you to let go of the day's worries. Allow the soothing sounds of my voice to guide you into a restful, peaceful state. Close your eyes if you wish, and let the stories of the Viking village, their threshing floors, and the graceful disposal of grain residue carry you into a world of calm and serenity. Now, let us drift softly into the heart of our story. The historical documentation regarding the maintenance of threshing floors in Viking villages is sparse, yet a meticulous examination reveals a continuous thread of protocols concerning grain residue disposal and the scheduling of tasks associated with these agricultural practices. This account aims to detail the chronological evolution of the procedures surrounding threshing floor maintenance, beginning with the earliest records of Viking agricultural practices in the late 8th century. The earliest known references to threshing floors in Scandinavia can be traced back to approximately 790 CE, around the coastal settlements of Norway. The archaeological site at Avaldsnes, located on the island of Karmøy, has yielded evidence of early agricultural practices, including the construction of designated threshing floors made from compacted earth and stone. These floors were integral to the post-harvest processing of grain, specifically barley and rye, which were staples in the Viking diet. In the late 800s, the settlement of Hedeby, now part of modern-day Denmark, emerged as a significant trading hub. Historical accounts from the Annals of Saint Bertin, written by the Frankish monk Hincmar of Reims, mention the efficient organization of agricultural practices in Hedeby. The community established a rudimentary administrative structure, wherein local chieftains oversaw the scheduling of threshing activities. The primary figures in this administrative hierarchy included the local jarl, who was responsible for the overall agricultural output, and a designated grain steward, tasked with maintaining the timetables for threshing floor operations. By the turn of the 10th century, the architectural design of threshing floors began to evolve. The Viking threshing floor typically consisted of a circular or rectangular area, frequently situated adjacent to communal barns or longhouses. These structures facilitated the easy transfer of harvested grain to the threshing area. Notably, the Barn of Haga, constructed in 930 CE in what is now Sweden, exemplified the architectural synergy between storage and processing, featuring a thatched roof and a stone foundation to support the weight of grain stored prior to threshing. The administrative procedures surrounding threshing floor maintenance were codified in the early 11th century, as outlined in the Gulating Law, an early Norwegian law code. This legal document stipulated operational guidelines for communal grain processing. Included in these regulations were specific timetables for when threshing could occur, dictated primarily by climatic conditions and the lunar calendar, as farmers believed that the moon's phases influenced both the quality of grain and the efficiency of the threshing process. Daily routines on the threshing floors were characterized by a repetitive series of tasks. Typically, the process began at dawn, with villagers gathering at the designated threshing location. Men and women alike participated in the labor, employing wooden flails to separate the grain from the chaff. This activity, while laborious, was crucial for ensuring the quality of the harvest. Historical records indicate that the average threshing period lasted from mid-August to late September, with specific days allocated to individual households based on the community's established rotation system. The disposal of grain residue, specifically the chaff and stems resulting from threshing, was an equally significant aspect of the threshing floor protocol. In the 11th century, it became customary for villages to have designated refuse areas, often situated at the peripheries of the settlement. The waste material was not only a byproduct of agricultural labor but also served dual purposes in Viking society. The chaff was often repurposed as animal bedding or compost, thereby adhering to an early form of sustainable agricultural practice. Historical records from the village of Birka, an important trading center from 750 CE onwards, indicate that a designated council convened biannually to discuss best practices in residue disposal, further emphasizing the communal approach to agricultural management. The significance of residue disposal was underscored by the establishment of fines for improper disposal methods, as codified in the aforementioned Gilead. After establishing the foundation, smaller stones were added to create a level surface. The Vikings sometimes mixed clay with the stones to fill in gaps and create a smoother surface, which helped in the efficient separation of grain from chaff during the threshing process. Historical records indicate that clay was often found in abundance in certain regions, such as the coastal areas of Norway, where the soil was rich and pliable. The clay would be gathered and mixed with water to form a malleable paste, which was then spread over the stone surface to create an ideal threshing floor. In addition to stone and clay, timber played a significant role in the construction of these threshing floors. Timber was often used to build surrounding structures or windbreaks, which helped protect the threshing area from the elements. For instance, in the late 10th century, Viking settlers in Greenland utilized driftwood washed ashore from the North Atlantic to construct windbreaks around their threshing floors. These structures not only shielded workers from harsh winds but also provided a space for gathering and socializing during the harvest season. The use of timber in this way highlights the Vikings' resourcefulness in adapting their surroundings to meet their agricultural needs. Moreover, the threshing process itself was a labor-intensive task that involved the use of simple tools such as wooden flails or sledges. The flail, typically made from a wooden handle and a swinging arm, was swung down onto the grain laid out on the threshing floor, breaking apart the heads of the grain and separating the edible kernels from the inedible husks. This technique was practiced throughout Scandinavia, with variations in design depending on the region and available materials. For example, a flail found at a Viking burial site in Sweden dated to around 850 CE had an intricately carved handle, demonstrating not only the functional aspect of the tool but also the artistic skills of the Vikings. In the broader context of Viking society, these threshing floors played a crucial role in sustaining communities. Grain was a staple in the Viking diet, and the ability to efficiently process it directly impacted the health and prosperity of a village. By the early 11th century, as Viking trade expanded, so too did the demand for high-quality grains, which encouraged innovations in agricultural practices and building techniques. The establishment of thriving trade routes not only brought new ideas and materials but also fostered a sense of cooperation among neighboring villages, as they often came together to share resources and labor during the busy harvest season. As a testament to their ingenuity, Viking threshing floors have been unearthed in various archaeological digs across Scandinavia, including sites in Iceland and the Scottish Isles, which showcase the widespread adoption of this agricultural practice. From the meticulous documentation in runic inscriptions to the intricate designs of tools and the social structures surrounding grain production, the evidence illustrates a vibrant and adaptive Viking culture that mastered the art of agriculture and community collaboration. The construction methods and materials utilized in the establishment of the Viking village threshing floors were reflective of the broader architectural practices observed in Norse settlements during the late 8th to early 11th centuries. Threshing floors, designated areas where grain was separated from chaff, were typically constructed on flat, dry ground. The choice of location was critical. These sites often required a minimum elevation of 5 meters above sea level to prevent flooding during seasonal rains and were frequently situated near grain storage facilities to facilitate efficient transportation of harvested crops. The primary material employed in the construction of these threshing floors was local stone, often granite or basalt, which was selected for its durability and flat surface. In many instances, these stones were quarried from nearby outcrops, with laborers transporting blocks weighing approximately 50 to 100 kilograms over distances averaging 200 to 300 meters. The stones were laid in a circular or rectangular pattern, measuring between 10 to 15 meters in diameter, with a thickness of roughly 15 centimeters. This construction method ensured that the floors remained level and stable under the weight of the grain and the animals used for threshing. Maintenance procedures were critical to ensuring the longevity and efficacy of the threshing floors. Regular inspections were mandated every 3 weeks during the peak harvest season from late July to early September. These inspections included checking for surface integrity, with any cracks or unevenness requiring immediate attention. The procedure involved the use of a wooden leveling tool, measuring 2 meters in length, to assess the flatness of the surface. Should any discrepancies be found, a mixture of crushed stone and fine sand, known as gravel mix, was applied to fill gaps and create a uniform surface. Each maintenance session was recorded meticulously in village logs, detailing the date, the names of the workers involved, and the materials used. The financial records associated with threshing floor maintenance were scrupulously kept, reflecting the economic intricacies of Viking agricultural practices. From 980 AD to 1000 AD, an average annual budget of 15 silver coins was allocated for the upkeep of the threshing floors. This amount, while seemingly trivial, was significant when considering the income generated from grain sales, which averaged 200 silver coins per annum. A detailed ledger was maintained, noting expenses such as labor, 2 silver coins per laborer per day, materials, 1 silver coin for 100 kilograms of gravel mix, and tools, averaging 5 silver coins for repairs to wooden threshers. The financial records also provided insight into the economic relationships within the village, highlighting that 30% of the maintenance costs were often covered through communal contributions, while the remaining 70% was derived from individual grain sales. Personnel involved in the maintenance of the threshing floors were organized into distinct roles, each with specific job descriptions. The primary overseer, or threshing master, was responsible for coordinating maintenance efforts and ensuring compliance with established protocols. This individual typically possessed extensive experience in agricultural practices and was often between the ages of 40 and 60. Supporting the threshing master were 2 types of workers, laborers and apprentices. Laborers, usually aged 20 to 40, were tasked with the physical labor associated with maintenance, including hauling materials and performing repairs. Apprentices, often youths aged 12 to 18, assisted with simpler tasks, such as collecting tools and cleaning the threshing area. The job descriptions were formally documented in a directory maintained by the village council. The threshing master's responsibilities included scheduling maintenance sessions, procuring materials, and training apprentices. Laborers were expected to report their hours worked, with typical shifts lasting from dawn until dusk, approximately 12 hours during the summer months. Apprentices were required to document their learning experiences, which were reviewed at the end of each harvest season. Technical specifications concerning the threshing floor maintenance protocols. Technical specifications of the threshing floors were documented in village annals, emphasizing the importance of standardization for efficiency and effectiveness. The optimal thickness of the earthen floor was recorded to be no less than 10 centimeters, which aided in the proper separation of grain from chaff. Threshing was accomplished by the use of wooden flails or by having livestock tread upon the grain, both methods requiring careful measurement of space to accommodate the necessary movement. The average size of the threshing floor continued to evolve over the centuries, with records indicating that by 1200 CE, many villages had increased the dimensions to approximately 15 meters in diameter to accommodate larger harvests. This expansion necessitated a corresponding increase in labor and materials, as well as a re-evaluation of the grain residue disposal protocols to manage the increased volume of byproducts effectively. In conclusion, the comprehensive examination of the construction methods, maintenance procedures, financial records, personnel roles, and technical specifications pertaining to the threshing floors of Viking villages illustrates a sophisticated and systematic approach to agricultural practices. These meticulous records not only demonstrate the ingenuity of Viking society but also provide valuable insights into their environmental stewardship and social organization, reflecting a legacy that continues to influence contemporary agricultural methodologies. The examination of construction methods and materials utilized in the establishment of the Viking village threshing floors reveals an intricate yet methodical approach characterized by the available resources and prevailing environmental conditions. The primary materials employed were locally sourced timber, stone, and, in some instances, clay. The initial construction phase, documented as early as 800 CE, involved the clearing of a flat area, typically measuring approximately 10 meters by 10 meters, which was essential for ensuring a stable and even surface for effective threshing practices. The Vikings, known for their resourcefulness, often selected sites for these threshing floors that were not only flat but also well-drained, minimizing the risk of water accumulation, which could hinder the threshing process. For example, archaeological findings from the Viking settlement at L'Anse-aux Meadows in Newfoundland, Canada, which dates back to around 1000 CE, reveal that the Vikings employed a careful selection of locations that facilitated optimal conditions for agricultural activities, including the construction of threshing floors. Once a suitable site was identified, the construction process began with the clearing of vegetation and the removal of any stones or debris. This initial phase was labor-intensive and often involved community collaboration. The clearing of a 100 square meter area could take several days, depending on the density of the vegetation. Following this, the construction team would level the ground, using hand tools such as axes and adzes, which were commonly crafted from iron and wood and were essential for shaping the timber. The next step in the construction of the threshing floor involved the preparation of the surface. This was done by compacting the soil through trampling or the use of heavy stones, a method that was both practical and effective. This compression helped create a sturdy base that could withstand the repeated impacts of threshing activities. In some instances, Viking builders would lay down flat stones as a surface layer over the compacted earth, which provided additional durability and ease of maintenance. The materials used in the construction of the threshing floors varied by region, reflecting the resources available to different Viking communities. In coastal areas, such as those found in Norway and Iceland, builders often used driftwood and local timber, while inland communities might have utilized larger trees from nearby forests, such as oak or birch. These trees were meticulously selected based on their size and strength, as they needed to support the weight of the grain being threshed and the vigorous actions of the threshers. As for the threshing process itself, it typically involved the use of wooden tools called threshing sledges or flails. These implements were often made from sturdy timber, with the flails being crafted from lighter wood to facilitate rapid movement. The threshers would strike the harvested grain, which had been laid out on the threshing floor, to separate the grain from the chaff. Historical records suggest that a team of 2 to 4 individuals could effectively thresh approximately 200 kilograms of grain in a single day, depending on the quality of the tools and the experience of the workers. Furthermore, the use of clay in some regions for constructing the edges of the threshing floor is indicative of the Vikings' adaptability to their environment. In places where timber was less accessible, such as the more barren landscapes of Greenland, clay was compacted and shaped to create a sturdy boundary for the threshing area, preventing grain from spilling over the edges during the process. This method not only optimized the use of available materials but also showcased the Vikings' ingenuity in agricultural practices. To understand the significance of threshing floors in Viking society, it's essential to consider the broader historical context. Between the late 8th and the late 11th centuries, the Viking Age was marked by extensive agricultural development, driven by the growing need for food to support expanding populations and thriving trade networks. The establishment of efficient threshing floors played a crucial role in increasing grain yields, which were vital for sustaining both local communities and long-distance trading ventures. Research has shown that the average Viking household required around 1,000 kilograms of grain annually to meet their dietary needs. The construction and effective use of threshing floors were therefore not just practical necessities but integral to the survival and economic stability of Viking settlements. The development of these agricultural practices coincided with the Vikings' transition from a predominantly nomadic lifestyle to more settled farming communities, further emphasizing the importance of such structures. In conclusion, the construction of threshing floors in Viking villages exemplifies a sophisticated understanding of materials, labor, and the environment. The methods employed reflect the ingenuity and adaptability of the Vikings, allowing them to optimize their agricultural production and support their expanding societies. Through careful selection of sites, materials, and construction techniques, the Vikings established a vital infrastructure that contributed to their enduring legacy in European history. The construction methods employed in the establishment of the Viking village threshing floors were characterized by a systematic approach, reflecting the agrarian focus of Norse society. Typically, the construction of a threshing floor would commence with the selection of a flat, well-drained site, ideally located near a water source to facilitate the washing of grain and the disposal of residue. The dimensions of these threshing floors varied, but a common size measured approximately 10 meters in diameter, allowing sufficient space for the thrashing of harvested cereals. The floor would then be meticulously leveled, often utilizing simple tools such as wooden planks and handheld digging implements. The primary materials utilized in the construction of the threshing floor included locally sourced stones and timber. One notable regulation mandated that each village maintain a designated threshing overseer, a role that involved not only the management of labor but also the enforcement of hygiene standards on the threshing floors. The overseer was responsible for ensuring that all floors were kept free of weeds and debris, which could attract pests and lead to contamination of the grain. Failure to comply with these regulations could result in fines or community service, a reflection of the importance placed on maintaining a sanitary agricultural environment. Moreover, as Viking trade expanded and interregional commerce became more prevalent, laws began to dictate the quality standards for grains exported from one region to another. The establishment of specific protocols for grain processing, including the timing of threshing and the methods of residue disposal, became integral to maintaining the integrity of trade relationships among various Viking settlements. ### Supply chain and logistics. The logistics involved in grain production and subsequent processing during the Viking Age were often intricate, given the reliance on both local resources and interregional trade networks. The supply chain for threshing floor maintenance comprised several components, including the acquisition of raw materials for construction, tools for threshing, and the transportation of grain to and from designated processing areas. In many instances, local timber was utilized for constructing threshing sledge frames, while stones were quarried from nearby riverbeds to create flat threshing surfaces. The procurement of these materials was often organized through communal efforts, where villagers would collaborate in sourcing and transporting resources to the threshing site. This cooperative approach not only ensured that sufficient materials were gathered but also fostered communal ties, as neighbors worked together for a shared agricultural goal. Once the grain was harvested and processed, the logistics of distribution became paramount. Villages often established intricate networks for sharing surplus grain, particularly in the wake of a bountiful harvest. Grain would be transported using horse-drawn carts, with routes meticulously planned to avoid areas prone to flooding or other natural hazards. Records from this period indicate that some villages developed a system of grain chests, designated storage containers that were marked with the date of harvest and the quantity of grain stored. These chests were crucial in managing supply levels throughout the year, particularly during the winter months when grain became scarce. ### Record-keeping methods. The methods of record-keeping associated with threshing floor maintenance and grain residue disposal protocols reveal a fascinating glimpse into the organizational practices of Viking communities. While it is well known that the Vikings did not employ a writing system in the same manner as contemporary societies, they utilized several alternative methods to maintain records. One prevalent method involved the use of tally sticks, which were wooden sticks that were notched to denote quantities of grain processed or residues disposed of. Each notch represented a specific measure, and these sticks served as both a record and a physical reminder of the quantities involved. This tangible approach to record keeping allowed for easy verification by the threshing overseer or other community members during audits. In addition to tally sticks, oral traditions played a crucial role in record keeping. Elders in the community often assumed the responsibility of recalling key events and practices related to threshing and grain disposal. Such oral histories were passed down through generations, ensuring that vital knowledge regarding seasonal cycles, maintenance schedules, and disposal protocols was preserved. Furthermore, with the gradual introduction of runes, some communities began to experiment with rudimentary forms of written documentation. While primarily used for monumental inscriptions and trade agreements, runes occasionally appeared on wooden tablets or stones that documented important agricultural events. However, the adoption of written record-keeping remained limited due to the logistical challenges of literacy and the costs associated with training scribes. In conclusion, the history of Viking village threshing floor maintenance timetables and grain residue disposal protocols is a reflection of a complex interplay of regional variations, evolving practices, regulatory frameworks, logistical considerations, and methods of record-keeping. This seemingly mundane aspect of Viking life reveals not only their agricultural ingenuity but also their capacity for communal cooperation, adaptation, and resilience in the face of environmental and socio-economic challenges. Through the lens of these practices, we gain a deeper understanding of the daily lives of the Vikings, their values, and their enduring legacy in the annals of history. The monotonous history of Viking village threshing floor maintenance timetables and grain residue disposal protocols, Part 7. Regional variations and comparisons. The study of Viking village threshing floor maintenance timetables and grain residue disposal protocols reveals a tapestry woven from the diverse threads of regional practices. The geographical variance in climate, soil type, and local grain variety significantly influenced the methodologies adopted by different Viking communities. For instance, the northernmost regions of Scandinavia, characterized by a harsher climate and shorter growing seasons, necessitated a more stringent timetable for threshing activities compared to their southern counterparts, where milder conditions allowed for a more leisurely approach. In the coastal villages of Norway, where the abundance of fish provided a supplementary protein source, grain cultivation was often secondary, leading to less rigorous management of threshing floors. Here, one might observe a more relaxed protocol for grain residue disposal, with remnants often being left to decompose naturally, enriching the soil for subsequent planting seasons. Contrarily, in the fertile plains of Sweden, the agrarian society relied heavily on extensive grain production, prompting the establishment of strict maintenance schedules for threshing floors. The meticulous cleaning of these areas was paramount, as any residual grain could attract unwanted pests and lead to spoilage of subsequent harvests. Additionally, the practices observed in Iceland, where volcanic soil provided unique growing conditions, further illustrate the regional differences in grain management. The Icelandic Vikings devised innovative means of grain disposal, often utilizing wind to scatter lighter chaff across their rocky terrain, thereby ensuring that no grain residue would hinder the growth of their precious crops. The comparative study of these practices sheds light on the adaptability of Viking societies to their environments, revealing a complex interplay of local customs and agricultural imperatives. Evolution over different time periods. The evolution of threshing floor maintenance and grain residue disposal protocols throughout the Viking Age is a subject worthy of meticulous examination. Initially, in the early stages of Viking expansion, the methods employed were rudimentary at best. The primary focus was on survival, with little regard for systematic maintenance or record-keeping. As communities grew, as the Viking Age progressed into the Middle Viking Age, circa 850 to 1050 CE, a notable shift occurred with the introduction of more sophisticated agricultural tools, such as the wooden threshing sledge. This innovation allowed for a more efficient separation of grain from chaff, thereby reducing the time spent on maintenance and increasing overall productivity. Consequently, the protocols for grain residue disposal began to formalize, with village councils establishing regulations regarding the proper disposal of chaff to prevent pest infestations and promote soil health. By the late Viking Age, circa 1050 to 1100 CE, the rise of trade networks and the growing interaction with continental Europe led to further refinements in threshing floor practices. The introduction of new crops, such as rye and barley, necessitated adaptations in maintenance schedules and residue disposal methods. This period also saw the formalization of bureaucratic regulations governing agricultural practices, as chieftains and local leaders recognized the economic significance of maintaining a reliable grain supply. Part 10: Bureaucratic Regulations and Laws. The establishment of bureaucratic regulations surrounding threshing floor maintenance and grain residue disposal emerged as a response to the increasing complexity of Viking society. With the consolidation of power in the hands of local chieftains and the formation of early legal codes, rules governing agricultural practices became more systematic and formalized. One of the earliest known legal texts, the Gragas, Old Norse for grey goose, emerged in the 12th century and outlined various laws pertaining to agricultural practices among Viking settlements. These laws included specific stipulations regarding the maintenance of threshing floors, mandating that all households were required to conduct annual inspections of their threshing sites. Failure to comply with these regulations could result in fines or communal ostracism, thereby reinforcing the importance of adherence to agricultural duties. Moreover, the regulations also addressed grain residue disposal protocols, stipulating that chaff and other remnants must be disposed of in designated areas to prevent contamination of the soil. This not only maintained the integrity of the farms but also ensured the sustainability of the surrounding environment. The establishment of designated disposal sites often led to the creation of communal composting areas, where grain residues could decompose and enrich the soil for future planting seasons. These bureaucratic measures reflect an evolving understanding of agricultural sustainability within Viking society. As the importance of grain as a staple food source became increasingly recognized, the regulations surrounding its production and maintenance took on greater significance. Part 11: Supply Chain and Logistics. The supply chain and logistics surrounding the maintenance of threshing floors and the disposal of grain residue were deeply intertwined with the broader agricultural economy of Viking settlements. The successful management of these processes necessitated a comprehensive understanding of resource availability, seasonal cycles, and labor demands. In terms of supply chain logistics, the availability of materials for the construction and repair of threshing floors was paramount. For instance, in regions where stone was plentiful, the construction of stone threshing floors became a priority, leading to the establishment of local quarries. The transportation of these materials, often using sledges or boats, required careful planning to align with seasonal weather patterns. The timing of such endeavors was critical, as harsh winter conditions could render transportation routes impassable, thus delaying essential maintenance and repairs. Grain residue disposal, too, was subject to logistical considerations. The disposal of chaff and other remnants often necessitated the coordination of labor among community members. In larger settlements, the logistics of transporting residue to designated communal disposal sites involved the careful scheduling of labor to ensure that no household was burdened disproportionately. This communal effort not only facilitated efficient waste management but also reinforced social bonds within the village. Furthermore, the timing of the harvest season had a profound impact on the logistics of grain processing. The synchronization of threshing activities across the village was crucial, as the collective effort in processing grain allowed for a more efficient use of resources and labor. Villagers often developed informal networks to communicate the readiness of their crops, thereby coordinating their threshing activities and ensuring that all households benefited from communal labor. Part 12: Record-Keeping Methods. Record-keeping in Viking agricultural practices, particularly concerning threshing floor maintenance and grain residue disposal, offers a fascinating glimpse into the administrative capabilities of Viking society. While the Vikings are often characterized by their oral traditions, evidence suggests that they employed a variety of methods for recording agricultural activities. One notable method involved the use of runestones, which often commemorated significant agricultural events or milestones within the community. These stones served not only as monuments but also as records of communal efforts in maintaining threshing floors and managing grain disposal. The inscriptions often included information on the size of the harvest, the condition of the threshing floors, and the collective efforts of village members. Additionally, the use of wooden tally sticks became increasingly common during the late Viking Age. These sticks, marked with notches or incisions, provided a tangible means of tracking the quantity of grain harvested and the amount of residue disposed of. Tally sticks served a dual purpose, functioning both as a record of agricultural practices and as a tool for resolving disputes over grain supplies among village members. The meticulous nature of these record-keeping practices underscores the importance of maintaining accurate accounts of agricultural activities. As Viking society transitioned towards more complex economic structures, the need for precise documentation became paramount. This evolution in record-keeping not only facilitated more effective resource management but also laid the groundwork for the administrative practices that would characterize later Scandinavian societies. In conclusion, the history of threshing floor maintenance timetables and grain residue disposal protocols in Viking villages reveals a rich tapestry of regional variation, bureaucratic regulation, logistical planning, and record-keeping practices. While these topics may seem mundane, they are emblematic of a society deeply attuned to the rhythms of agricultural life and the intricate relationships that bind communities together in the pursuit of sustenance. Part 9: Regional Variations and Comparisons. The history of Viking village threshing floor maintenance timetables and grain residue disposal protocols reveals an intricate tapestry of regional variations that reflect not only the geographical diversity of the Viking world but also the socio-economic landscapes that influenced agricultural practices. The Scandinavian regions, characterized by their distinct climates, soil types, and cultural practices. In Denmark, the integration of Viking agricultural practices with emerging feudal systems produced a hybrid of protocols which were heavily influenced by bureaucratic oversight. Threshing floors were often located near the manor houses, and the proximity to local lords allowed for more direct oversight of grain processing activities. This led to a more pronounced emphasis on record-keeping, as local lords required detailed logs of grain types, yields, and residue management practices to ensure proper taxation and resource allocation. Thus, while the underlying principles of threshing floor maintenance and grain disposal were consistent across Viking communities, localized adaptations resulted in a rich tapestry of practices that reflected both environmental factors and socio-political structures. Evolution over different time periods. As Viking society evolved from the early medieval period into the later Middle Ages, so too did the practices surrounding threshing and grain residue management. Initially, during the Viking Age, circa 793–1066 AD, threshing was a labor-intensive process often conducted by the entire village. The communal nature of threshing ensured that grain was processed in a timely manner, and it served as a social gathering point. The use of wooden mallets and the primitive threshing sleds characterized this period, with little emphasis on efficiency or timeliness. However, as agricultural techniques improved and the demand for grain increased, a shift occurred. By the 11th century, innovations such as the introduction of the watermill began to influence grain processing methods. The mechanization of certain aspects of threshing allowed for greater efficiency, leading to a corresponding shift in maintenance timetables. It became necessary to adjust protocols to accommodate the new machinery, which required a different set of maintenance schedules and disposal methods for the byproducts of milling. In subsequent centuries, particularly during the rise of medieval towns and the increased market focus on grain trade, the bureaucratic aspects of threshing and grain disposal became more pronounced. Local governments began to implement regulations regarding the disposal of grain residue, mandating specific methods to prevent soil degradation and pest infestations. These regulations were often codified in local laws, reflecting a growing recognition of agricultural sustainability and the long-term viability of grain production. The evolution of these practices was not merely a reflection of technological advancement but also a response to changing economic realities. As grain became a commodity within burgeoning trade networks, the protocols surrounding its production and disposal became more rigorous, reflecting the needs of a society transitioning towards a more market-oriented economy. Bureaucratic regulations and laws. The establishment of bureaucratic regulations regarding threshing floor maintenance and grain residue disposal emerged as a necessary response to the growing complexities of agricultural production. Local authorities recognized the need to standardize practices to ensure both efficiency and environmental stewardship. These regulations often took the form of decrees issued by local lords or councils, which were then disseminated throughout the community. One notable example of such regulation is the grain management protocols that were established in the late 12th century. These protocols mandated that all villages maintain a designated threshing floor, which was to be inspected annually by appointed officials. Failure to comply with these regulations could result in fines or restrictions on grain sales. The inspections often focused on three main criteria: the condition of the threshing floor, adherence to disposal protocols, and the overall yield of grain produced. The disposal of grain residue was particularly scrutinized, with regulations specifying that all residue must be burned within a set period post-harvest. This was to mitigate the risk of attracting pests and to ensure that the ash from the burning would enrich the soil for future planting. The presence of residue in fields beyond this period could lead to substantial fines, and in some cases, the confiscation of grain for non-compliance. Moreover, the bureaucratic framework surrounding these practices necessitated comprehensive record-keeping. Detailed logs were required to track grain yields, disposal activities, and maintenance schedules. These records were often maintained in communal ledgers, which served both to document compliance with regulations and to facilitate local taxation based on grain production. Supply chain and logistics. In the context of the Viking villages, the supply chain and logistics surrounding threshing and grain residue disposal were complex and multifaceted. The process began with the cultivation of grain, which required careful planning and coordination of labor. Grain was often sown in the spring and harvested in late summer, necessitating a well-timed sequence of activities to ensure optimal yields. Once harvested, the grain was transported to the threshing floor, which was often centrally located to minimize transportation time. The logistics of this transport were crucial, especially in larger communities where distances could be significant. Villagers often relied on yokes and carts, and the condition of local paths could greatly affect the efficiency of this movement. In some cases, a system of cooperative transport was established, where multiple households would band together to transport their grain simultaneously, thus reducing the burden on individual families. Post-threshing, the logistics shifted to the management of grain residue. The collection and disposal of residue were often a communal effort, with designated days set aside for burning or composting. The residue itself was sometimes repurposed. For instance, straw could be utilized for thatching roofs or for bedding livestock, thus integrating waste management into the larger agricultural system. Moreover, the trade of grain itself introduced additional layers to the supply chain. As Viking trade networks expanded, some villages began to specialize in specific types of grain, leading to a more pronounced division of labor. This specialization demanded efficient logistics to transport grains to local markets or trading hubs, further complicating the practices around threshing and disposal. Record-keeping methods. Record-keeping in Viking communities regarding threshing and grain residue disposal was a critical aspect of agricultural management, ensuring that both individual households and the community at large could maintain compliance with local regulations while also optimizing their agricultural practices. The methods of documentation evolved over time, reflecting the changing needs of society. In the earliest periods, record-keeping was often informal, relying on oral traditions and communal memory. As agricultural practices became more complex, however, the need for written records became evident. By the late Viking Age, rudimentary forms of record-keeping began to emerge, often in the form of tally sticks or simple ledgers that recorded the quantity of grain harvested and the amount of residue disposed of. With the advent of more formalized bureaucratic structures, another key figure was Sigrid the Steadfast, a matriarchal leader in a small coastal village known for its innovative grain management techniques. In the year 994, she introduced a systematic approach to grain residue disposal that involved communal burning of chaff in designated areas, reducing waste and enhancing soil fertility through ash. This practice not only improved crop yields in subsequent seasons but also fostered a sense of community, as villagers came together for this annual event, reinforcing social bonds that were crucial for survival in the harsh northern climate. ### specific case studies with dates. To illustrate the practical applications of these maintenance timetables and protocols, we can look at specific case studies from various villages. For instance, in the year 1032, the village of Haugaskog observed a particularly harsh winter, prompting a deviation from their traditional threshing floor maintenance schedule. The local council, led by the aforementioned Eirika Threshing Story, convened to discuss the implications of delayed cleaning and residue disposal. Their decision to prioritize immediate cleaning despite the inclement weather resulted in a notable reduction of grain loss due to mold and pests, as recorded in the village ledger. Conversely, the village of Jorndal in 1005 adhered rigidly to their established protocols. During this year, they encountered an unusually wet summer that delayed harvesting. The villagers, under the guidance of their chief, Olav the Resourceful, were unable to clean the threshing floors as per the usual timetable. This lapse resulted in significant spoilage, leading to a food shortage that lasted well into the following winter. The ramifications of this event were felt for generations, as the villagers had to adapt their practices to mitigate the risks posed by changing climatic conditions. ### comparative analysis with other regions. A comparative analysis of Viking threshing practices with those in contemporary regions such as Anglo-Saxon England and the Frankish Empire reveals striking contrasts in methods of grain residue disposal. While Viking communities predominantly utilized communal burning, as exemplified by Sigrid the Steadfast's practices, Anglo-Saxon communities tended to bury their leftover chaff. This burial method was believed to enhance soil structure, although it often led to the emergence of pests due to the anaerobic conditions created by the decomposition of organic matter. In contrast, the Franks implemented a more mechanized approach, utilizing rudimentary threshing machines that allowed for the rapid processing of grain. However, their protocols for grain residue were less organized, leading to issues of waste management that plagued several communities. Archaeological findings from the region indicate a higher incidence of rodent infestations as a direct consequence of improper disposal methods, raising questions about the long-term sustainability of their agricultural practices. ###archaeological findings and interpretations. Archaeological excavations at sites such as Gokstad and Osberg have yielded artifacts that provide valuable insight into the practices of threshing floor maintenance and grain residue disposal. The discovery of specially designed wooden scoops, believed to date back to the 9th century, suggests that Vikings employed specific tools for the meticulous cleaning of threshing floors. These tools were often intricately carved, indicating their importance in daily life. Further analysis of soil samples from these sites has revealed a distinct layering of organic material, which corresponds with the documented practices of burning grain residue. Such findings have led scholars to postulate that these disposal methods played a crucial role in soil health and crop productivity. The ash from burned residues not only provided essential nutrients but also acted as a deterrent against certain pests, a fact that has been corroborated by contemporary agricultural studies. ###primary source quotations, invented but plausible. To further illustrate the significance of these practices in Viking society, one might consider the following invented yet plausible quotations attributed to historical figures of the time. Viking Threshing's story is documented as stating, "The cleanliness of our threshing floors is the first line of defense against the ravages of winter. A tidy floor is a testimony to a prosperous harvest." This sentiment encapsulates the meticulous nature of Viking agricultural practices. Similarly, Sigrid the Steadfast was quoted as saying, "In the ash of our fires lies the promise of tomorrow's harvest. We burn not just to dispose, but to nourish the land that nourishes us." Her words reflect the deep connection that Viking communities had with their environment and the cyclical nature of agricultural life. ###conclusion. In summation, the exploration of Viking village threshing floor maintenance timetables and grain residue disposal protocols reveals a tapestry of agricultural wisdom interwoven with the lives of minor historical figures who contributed significantly to the sustainability of their communities. Through specific case studies, comparative analyses with other regions, and archaeological findings, we glean a clearer understanding of the intricate and often monotonous practices that underpinned Viking agricultural life. The attention to detail in these practices, from the cleaning of threshing floors to the communal burning of grain residues, underscores the societal values of cooperation, resourcefulness, and respect for the land. It is a history that, while perhaps lacking in dramatic flair, is rich in lessons about the importance of diligence and foresight in the face of nature's unpredictability. As we reflect on these practices, we are reminded that even the most monotonous aspects of history can yield profound insights into the human experience. And so, dear listeners, we come to the end of our tranquil exploration into the monotonous yet fascinating history of Viking village threshing floor maintenance timetables and the protocols surrounding grain residue disposal. Together, we have journeyed through the gentle rhythms of life in these ancient communities, where the cyclical nature of work and rest wove a comforting tapestry of daily existence. We began by immersing ourselves in the meticulous processes that defined the Viking Age, where every grain mattered, and every step of threshing was a labor of love. We learned how the villagers, with their carefully crafted timetables, harmonized their efforts with the changing seasons, ensuring that the bounty of their harvest was treated with utmost respect. Each grain, every residue was a testament to their hard work, and the care they took in disposal reflected their deep connection to the land. As we moved through time, we marveled at how these routines, seemingly monotonous, were imbued with meaning and purpose. The rhythmic sound of tools on straw, the gentle rustle of grain being carefully swept away, and the collective efforts of families working side by side painted a vivid picture of their lives. We pondered the delicate balance of labor and leisure, and how the Viking people found peace and solace in the simplicity of their tasks. Now, as you settle into a peaceful state, I invite you to carry these calming